Well, folks, here again for the weekly forecast. Of course, during this last week, we dealt with successive waves of energy moving out of the southwestern U.S. trough that brought thunderstorm activity to the state. Probably the heaviest concentration of heavy precipitation occurred as we got into Thursday with a warm front lifting up from Kansas, touched off a line of thunderstorms from southern Nebraska moving up toward the northeast. And then behind that, of course, we've seen all the tornadic activity that originated in east central and north central Kansas, moving up into southern Nebraska. The good news is as we go out into later next week, we start to see a drier pattern materialize. How long that'll last remains to be seen, but at least there's some hope in sight that we'll get a few days of drying. But more importantly, as we go and look at the latest ENSO update, we basically are looking at the sea surface temperature in the equatorial Pacific. We'll notice that last month we talked about this cold pocket starting to develop in the eastern Pacific that has now raced east or westward and now takes over much of the central Pacific. Although it is not a very wide regime, it is the initial start. Underneath of that, we got cold water all the way from Australia to South America. So the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia has indicated that this El Nino event is over. We haven't seen that come out of the U.S. Climate Prediction Center yet in terms of the ending of this El Nino. And from the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia, they're indicating that they believe La Nina will begin sometime between June and August. So with that in mind, the Climate Prediction Center's latest release of the summer precipitation forecast shows above normal precipitation over the central plains. But as we get into the August, September, October period, we see this below normal precipitation. So remember that when we see these areas, doesn't mean the entire period is going to be below normal. There can be distinct periods of wet or dry conditions. And a further update, look at this with this week's edition of Crop Watch, cropwatch.unl.edu, and I'll talk more in detail about this event. Now, in terms of the upper air pattern, here's what remains of that trough. The first piece of energy going to our northeast, touching off the thunderstorm activity as we go into tomorrow. We're expecting another piece of energy that's going to ride toward the northeast, although there is a slight ridging. A lot of this precipitation may stay to our south. And as we go into Monday, we see yet another piece of energy trying to make its way up to the northeast with a piece of trough trying to move down toward the southeast. So we'll see a convergence of precipitation, possibly some decent thunderstorm activity on Monday, which is Memorial Day. As we get into Tuesday, we see this trough starting to race toward the southeast, which will touch off another line of heavy thunderstorm activity across the state in the central plains. But as we go into Wednesday, we start to see this trough moving toward the Great Lakes, pushing a cold front through our region, so we'll start to see a much drier trend on the backside of this. And hopefully this will last for a few days in this northwest flow. As we get into Thursday, of course, we see this ridge trying to build in as the trough tries to deepen over the Great Lakes, bring a little bit warmer and drier weather to our region. And as we get into Friday, there are signs of a slight buckle in the jet stream over the Great Lakes, but it keeps the dry conditions into our place, and it really holds it till at least Sunday. So we look at the 8 to 14 day forecast, we see from next Thursday through the following Tuesday, basically below normal temperatures to the south, above normal to the west as that ridge builds in. But more importantly, we start to see a drier pattern materializing over the northern plains, with the wet conditions basically from the southern border of Nebraska southward. So overall, we do have a chance for drier conditions next week. We'll wait to see whether or not models are up to speed on this or if they're being too aggressive with this dry pattern. But overall, at least there's some hope in sight that we will start to see a drier pattern materialize as we get into the middle of next week.